Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to Gaston Hall. I hope you all enjoyed the breakout sessions and had a good lunch. My name is Alexis Childs, and I've had the honor of serving as this year's sponsorship chair. First, I want to thank the over 30 sponsoring organizations that have made this year's conference possible. We are also deeply grateful to the numerous Georgetown alumni, departments, and administrators for their ongoing support. The materials received in the red folders during registration earlier today were thoughtfully curated by these organizations to mark the 27th year of this conference. Each of these organizations represents the grassroots heart of the pro-life movement, educating, inspiring, and empowering individuals across the United States and beyond to advocate for the unborn. They are truly among the best this movement has to offer. I encourage you to take a moment to look at their names on the back of your conference programs, and if you haven't already, visit their tables on the first floor of Healy Hall. I would also like to give special recognition to the Knights of Columbus, one of our longest-standing sponsors. For over 2 decades, they have been unwavering supporters of this conference. In partnership with our local council, the Knights of Columbus provided the introductory video featuring Cardinal O'Connor that we viewed earlier today and are also prominently featured in the literature you received. Their faith and action and ASAP initiatives are leading efforts within the pro-life movement, and we are profoundly grateful for their partnership. Additionally, we would like to give a special thank you to Giant Microbes for the little plushies that they donated. They were a huge hit with our attendees this year. Thank you so much for that. With that, I will now hand it over to Leah. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexis. Now that you have all had the opportunity to hear Jenny Radley Lichter's keynote address, as well as attend the breakout sessions on a variety of life issues, we turn to the conference panel discussion. Our panel discussion this year will directly address the theme of the conference, the pro-life mission after birth, a lifelong devotion. In this conversation, our panelists will consider how the call to serve mothers, children, and families does not stop when the child is born, and the supports that the movement provides from conception until natural death. Before we move into the panel discussion, we would like to remind our attendees again of our speech and expression policy. Georgetown University is committed to standards promoting speech and expression that foster the exchange of ideas and opinions. While it is recognized that not everyone today may share the same views as the speaker, it is expected that everyone in attendance at this event respect the right of the speakers and our conference board to share their perspectives and ideas by not causing a disruption to the event's activities. At the conclusion of the panel, there will be a question and answer session during which you may ask questions and engage in dialogue. Please be sure to phrase your question in the form of a question. And finally, in the interest of time, we ask that each person be discreet and ask only one question.
It is now my distinct honor to introduce to you our panelists and moderator. We will begin with our moderator, Catherine Hadro. Please hold your applause till all the panelists and our moderator have taken their seats. Catherine is the host of founding EWTN Pro-Life Weekly and a veteran Catholic journalist with extensive experience covering life issues, global events, and major church milestones. Catherine brings a host of experience, balance, and deep subject matter knowledge to guiding a thoughtful and respectful dialogue. I would like to introduce our first panelist, Christina Bennett, now. Christina brings the perspective of adoption and life affirmed. A pro-life missionary, writer, and media correspondent, her advocacy is rooted in her own story of nearly being aborted before a stranger intervened and saved her life. She has since served in leadership roles in pregnancy resource centers and national advocacy organizations, testified before Congress, and regularly represents the pro-life cause in national media.
Next, I would like to introduce Jamie Towey. Jamie brings the perspective of opposition to euthanasia and assisted suicide. As president of Aging with Dignity, he leads the nation's foremost advanced care planning organization and oversees Assisted Suicide Watch, a program monitoring the impact of assisted suicide legislation across the United States. His work focuses on protecting vulnerable populations and promoting ethical, life-affirming care at the end of life. And now let us welcome our final panelist, Clare Ath. Clare brings the perspective of crisis pregnancy centers and maternal support. She serves as Senior Policy Analyst for Human Coalition, a national organization focused on supporting women facing unplanned pregnancies and protecting life. Drawing on experience in education, government, and work with vulnerable populations, Clare advocates for policies that strengthen women, families, and communities. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to all of our panelists. Thank you again so much for being here, and now I'd like to turn over to our moderator, Catherine Hadro.
Thank you so much. It is an honor to be here and to be joined by these esteemed panelists. I know it's a bitter cold out there today, but it's a joy to be here. Well, our theme today for this discussion is the pro-life mission after birth, a lifelong devotion. So just to start us off, I want to ask every panelist the same question. One of the most common and what I believe to be one of the most lazy critiques of the pro-life movement is that we are simply pro-birth. So given this theme that we're discussing today, what is your response to this claim that pro-lifers are only pro-birth? Christina, I'd like to start with you and then go down the panel from there.
Sure. So if I am talking to someone one-on-one and they're saying, pro-lifers are only pro-birth, they just care about the baby, before it's born, I like to ask them a question. What pro-lifers are you talking about? Can you tell me their names? Who are they? Because what you will find out is that most people don't actually know the names of any pro-lifers except for the politicians that they do not like. So the politicians that they do not like, that they see them talking about abortion, when they think about the pro-life community, that's who they're thinking of. I promise you, they are not thinking of the local pregnancy resource center director. And they're not even thinking of the elderly person perhaps that's praying the rosary in front of the abortion clinic. They're thinking of people that they see on the news that perhaps they talk about an abortion in a way that they don't like. And so I'll ask them, who are you talking about? And then we'll begin a discussion, and I try to help them to understand that the pro-life movement is so much larger than they understand. Do you know about pregnancy centers? Do you know about maternity homes? Do you know about sidewalk advocates? Do you know about student groups? Do you know about all of these people who are giving support and aid and resources to mothers, not only when they're pregnant, but even after the baby is born? And of course, with pregnancy resource centers, we're talking about 2+ years after the child is born that a woman can come in and get clothes and diapers and support for her and her child. So I like to just talk to them, to help them to see that perhaps they really don't know the pro-life movement that they're accusing.
It's a really good answer. Jamie.
Well, we're a long way off from birth on my end of the issue, so we don't get that one levied very much. Look, what we try to focus on is ensuring that as life progresses, people are able to see that aging, something that our society really, I don't think sees as valuable anymore, is something worth having. That aging is a blessing. Right. It's not a curse. In a world where there's all this technological innovation and a lot of it good, but all these solutions to people suffering through tech and things like that, that humans come first in the middle of all of that, and that all of us have the ability to finish life with confidence. So for us, it's just about calling, to attention the innate dignity that the human person has, regardless of whether you're living with a cancer diagnosis or whether your mother has Alzheimer's and can't remember your name, or whether this is someone with a severe disability. We all have innate dignity, and that's something that when our society turns its back on that's when we start running into issues. So we want to promote hope at the end of life in what we do.
Beautiful. Claire, what's your response when people say, well, pro-lifers are only pro-birth?
Yeah, so Catherine, I work for an organization called Human Coalition, and we are a national network of pregnancy resource centers and telecare, and we serve about 50,000 abortion-determined moms a year. So to that question, I would just immediately reference our kind of flagship program that we call our continuum of care, that we are not an organization saying, don't get an abortion, here's some diapers, see you later. We are there with nurses, with social workers, to walk with this mom during her pregnancy and long after. There's no expiration date on the care that we are going to give this mom or the kinds of care. Is it that she needs social support, financial help, job training? We're there to walk with her. And for anyone that poses that kind of question, I would love to ask them to get involved and say, what would you like to do to help these moms and care for their babies?
And offer them that challenge. Yeah, Christina.
Okay, just one more thought as well.
Yeah.
Even if someone is quote unquote pro-birth, and perhaps the only thing they do is try and make sure that a baby does not die from an abortion, and they don't do anything else to support the mom, that in and of itself is actually enough, because you are helping to prevent a child from dying. So there's nothing wrong with just that action. Like, we're talking and saying, yes, we want to do all these other things, but even if someone is standing in front of an abortion clinic and a woman's going in and they're saying, please don't kill your baby, and the person turns around and says, I'm not going to do that, thank you for telling me that, and they walk away and they never see that person again, you can label that person pro-birth, but they saved a life. So even in the accusation, being pro-birth, or which we're not, that's their language, but just the act of trying to prevent a child from dying so the mother will give birth to that child and they will live, is a heroic thing.
Christina, yep, you got it. We agree. Christina, I wanted to hit on pretty early on in our conversation. Our audience heard a little bit just in your introduction. You have a very powerful personal testimony. Abortion has touched your life in a very profound way. Do you mind sharing a bit more about that and why you are so passionate?
Oh, I would love to, yes. And it ties into what I was just saying, because that is what happened to me. My mother was going to abort me at Mount Sinai Hospital in Hartford, Connecticut. I heard there might be some people in this room from Connecticut. Is that true? Connecticut people? Okay, we got a couple people in here. That's where I was born and that's where I live now. And she went by herself to Mount Sinai Hospital in Hartford, Connecticut to abort me. She was being coerced by my father. He already had 2 children at the time from 2 other women. She did stop at her church before she went to the a hospital to get an abortion, but her minister, friend, mentor person told her, you know what, if you come back to this church, I'm putting my foot in the door, not letting you in, because she was just so disgusted that she had had sex outside of marriage, and she was judging her and didn't want to teach her any more about God. And so my mom felt really rejected and pressured from my dad, rejected by her mentor. And it was a janitor in the hospital, an elderly African-American woman, who saw my mom in a white robe, and she saw her in the hallway crying, about to go in to get the abortion, and she said, do you want to have this baby? My mom said yes, and she said, God will give you the strength. Now, it didn't end there, because she actually went into the abortionist's office and she saw the blood on the floor because he didn't clean up the blood from the last baby that he killed. And she said, I've changed my mind, I want to keep my baby. He said, no, you're just nervous. He said, you can get through this. He said, you've already paid for this. And when those things didn't work, he raised his voice and said, don't leave this room. But she ran out and she saved my life. And I found this out when I was in college. So it took me over 20 years, because she kept this as a deep secret. I was going to a church in college, and someone approached me and said, and this is what, I'm a Christian, and this is what people call prophetic words or words of knowledge, whatever you might call it. But someone said, God wants you to know something remarkable happened around the time of your birth. So I asked my mom, did anything remarkable happen? And she said, I met an angel before you were born. I don't want to talk to you about it. So then I waited a couple. That's really chill, right?
Oh what a cliffhanger.
Okay, Mom, good to know. I guess I'll just, never ask you about that story again. So I waited 3 months, and then I came back, and I was like, what do you mean you met an angel? And then she was like, oh, you're gonna hate me. And then she said it was this janitor who she never saw again. And so that adds to my point. She never saw her, but she went up to my mom and she said, God will give you the strength to keep your baby. And then now here I am, 40, almost 45 years old.
Praise God.
Amen.
Oh my gosh. Praise God. Wow. Claire, we have been talking about the very real material support that pro-life pregnancy centers do provide for women, and the necessity and importance of these brick and mortar buildings existing. But I kind of want to do a little bit of a reality check about the ever-evolving pro-life landscape right now, and how the reality is most abortions today are from the abortion pill, from chemical abortions. And young women, women of all ages, are accessing this from their bedroom, from their dorm room, online. How is the pregnancy center movement, how is the pro-life movement meeting this moment?
Yes, no, that is a great question, Catherine. And so at Human Coalition, our name was actually originally Online for Life, because what we're doing is meeting the mom where she's at, which is on her cell phone. She's going online and she's Googling, how do I get an abortion pill? Where is the nearest abortion clinic to me? And what's happening is in those Google searches, number 1, Planned Parenthood, 2, Whole Woman's Health, 3, Hey Jane. And this isn't organic. These are paid digital searches that these pro-abortion organizations are making to prey on vulnerable mothers. So at Human Coalition, we are looking to go head-to-head with Planned Parenthood and get in this fight. And so we're doing the digital ads as well. And I tell people I meet with all the time that Google is the new sidewalk. And sidewalk counseling, it's so important, but I think it needs to be a portion of what we do. And that online digital advocacy is more and more important.
But there has to be challenges to that too, working with, big internet.
Yes. So there are, and that is one of the things that we're up against is censorship from big tech. I know there's been multiple suits with Google censoring different ads that are put up. We've even run into issues, and we always make sure we have disclaimers. We do not provide for or refer for abortions, but it is a concern that at any time Google could pull our marketing because they don't like our values and that we stand for life.
That's really fascinating. That we'll have to, I think, grapple with as a movement, and how to, again, meet this moment. Jamie, your organization, Aging with Dignity, has a special connection to Mother Teresa. And I think when we think of, I'll speak for myself, when I think of Mother Teresa, I think of her care for people who are impoverished, but not necessarily specifically the elderly. So do you mind sharing more about that history and that connection there?
Yeah, I think for most people, especially in Gen Z, even in my generation, millennials, I think people have worked in a soup kitchen run by the Missionaries of Charity or something, and I don't think they fully realize that what brought Mother into the public eye was her work with the dead, with the dying, and with the elderly. She was pulling people off the streets of Calcutta, for decades before she even got attention for it. And so that's really kind of the heart of her ministry. As it relates to us, we were founded about 30 years ago this year, so we ourselves are aging with dignity. Thank you.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. I'm here all night. But no, so we were founded by my father, Jim Towey, and he was her friend and legal advisor for the last 12 years of her life. He met her in Calcutta, India. Wow. He worked, the first thing that he did was visit her home of the dying in Kalighat, in the heart of Calcutta, saw the work that she did. I won't give the whole story. You can hear the whole story, by the way, in his book, To Love and Be Loved, a personal portrait of Mother. We get no proceeds from it, goes to the missionaries. But it was that work that opened his eyes to recognizing the human person in these moments of suffering. He actually lived in her AIDS home here in Washington, D.C., now, which is called Gift of Peace, but at the time, that's how it started, pulling people off the streets that were being rejected by the healthcare system, by the government, that were dying of AIDS, and these Catholic nuns were pulling them in. So that perspective on death is not just this medical moment where you're a list of symptoms meant to be alleviated by a doctor. It's this time where it's this incredible personal moment and the spiritual moment. And Mother Teresa exemplified how to care for that aspect of the human person more than anything. And so that's what drove him to found Aging with Dignity, to try to bring hope to Americans at the end of life in the midst of this hyper-medicalized, increasingly tech-heavy end-of-life stage.
I'm just reflecting now, I can't, the difference that caring for someone with dignity in their final stage of life, even the medical difference that can make. I remember maybe 8 years ago, I actually did a story on the Gift of Peace house, this house run by the Missionaries of Charity in DC, and they introduced me to this man who was dying from AIDS. And when the sisters took him in, I think the doctor said he had a few days. And so he'd be with them for the last few days of his life. It had been months and months because of just the love he was receiving from these sisters. it makes a difference.
No, it absolutely does. And I think that as we continually atomize care and make it just about, these are these symptoms and these boxes that need to be checked, we lose sight of the fact that, physicians, if there's any doctors or nurses in the room, what got you into healthcare, right? It was caring for people. It was helping bring peace at the end of life. It's not just about checking these boxes. And so she exemplified that, and that's what's driven us for 30 years.
That's beautiful. I'm just thinking here, our conversation, these are such, heart issues, human dignity issues, and yet, unfortunately, the topic and conversation of abortion and the pro-life conversation has become so politicized, and it's often seen through this political lens. Christina, I find you so effective at taking it beyond the political lens. Do you have any recommendations about how we can better do that, so that when we're having conversations, we don't have to fall into this party debate?
Sure. I think that one of the best things that we can do is become really good storytellers, and we all have stories. And people, when they are making decisions about what to do with their parents, if they should take care of them or not, if they should have an abortion or not, they're not always thinking about the law. A lot of times they're thinking about something they've heard in their mind from someone else, either a story that scares them, if you keep this baby, you won't be able to finish college. If you take in your mother, your life's going to be ruined. And we have to tell an opposite story. When I was in my 20s, I volunteered at elderly homes just because that was just something that God put on my heart to do. And I thought, there was this one particular woman that told me a story that just stuck with me. She was a woman from, I think it was Ethiopia, and she said, we travel to your country for a better life, and we come here for, we sacrifice and we leave everything behind, but the way that you treat your elderly people is just so disturbing, because we honor our elderly people in a different way. That one interaction in the hallway put a seed in my heart where I said, when I get older, I want to take care of my parents. Now, my parents, they're not at that place yet, but my husband's mother has lived with us now for 5 years, and she has dementia, and we are full-time caretakers for her, and it is very challenging. But I always think back to that story. I think back to that moment in the hallway where this woman said that to me, and it really kind of convicted my heart. I thought, wow, she's looking at America and in one way thinking it's this beautiful place, but then also has this disdain, because how can you treat your elderly people? And I thought, I don't ever want to be a part of that. I want to be different. And so that's one example with end-of-life care, but there's so many others. Obviously, you heard my story. I work for Live Action. We had a congressional press conference when we first came in, and I brought a woman with me. Her name is Shanice, and she's from Connecticut, and I got connected with her over the phone, and she said, I want to tell my story. Her story is that she almost died from the abortion pill, that she took the abortion pill, fetal remains were left inside of her, she went into septic shock, she was in a medically induced coma for a month. She wakes up from the coma, and they said, we're sorry, we had to do a partial hysterectomy, and you are infertile. And she's 25 years old. And they're telling her that the one baby that she killed in the abortion is the only baby that she will ever be able to hold in her womb. And she was here with us this morning at an event that we're doing for lawmakers. These stories need to be told, because someone might not be interested in the political aspect of things, but storytelling can go straight to the heart, especially her being an African-American woman. It can break down some of the lies that people believe, this is an issue for just conservatives or just white people or just this type, this certain type of people. And it's like, no, these things impact us all. And so we have to, in our storytelling, show the horror of abortion, the horror of abandoning people in their elder years because we're afraid of their conditions, or letting them die because we think that that's dying with dignity, which is a complete and utter lie. They're always trying to bring that up in Connecticut, and we're always like, absolutely not. And thankfully, it's not happened yet, but we've been fighting many years against doctor-assisted suicide, and we have to show the beauty of life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and I'm thinking of the March for Life theme this year was life is a gift, and it is a gift in the beginning of life, at the end of life. That's a recurring theme in our conversation as well. You know, Claire, we're about 3.5 years now since the Supreme Court Dobbs decision, which overturned Roe v. Wade, and now the U.S. is this patchwork of different laws. It looks different from state to state. I'm curious, from the Pregnancy Pro-Life Center movement, which they're on the front lines of meeting women in need. What's been the impact on these pregnancy centers since Roe was overturned?
So since Roe was overturned, there has been so many great states like Florida and Texas, Indiana, who have passed legal protections for preborn children. But that isn't enough, because the reality is, while abortion may be banned in your state, there are still moms that are seeking abortion. And they're going to do it on their phone, online, or they might drive, like Indiana. It's a short drive away to Chicago. So the reality is that pregnancy resource centers are more important than ever before. And they need support from the local community, and that doesn't always just look financial. Actually, the number one thing that we see from the moms we work with is that they need physical support. They need a friend. They need a community. Right. So it is so important right now that we get involved with our local pregnancy centers and give mom the support that they need.
Even just like car rides somewhere, maybe. Just, can you watch my baby?
Dropping off diapers.
Yeah.
And I would say it makes me think of one of the most heartbreaking stories was a client that we had in Texas, who she already had 2 children and became pregnant with twins. And her husband, feeling overwhelmed by this pregnancy, ultimately left her. She didn't have any family in the state, didn't have any friends, and so she knew with twins that she would have to go in for a C-section, and was scheduling the C-section and realized she didn't have anyone to care for her 2 children while she went in to give birth to twins. And the option that her OBGYN had given to her was you would have to turn your kids over to CPS, and they can watch them while you are giving birth. Wow. That was not a realistic option for her. She got connected with Human Coalition, and we connected her with a local church in the area where a mom graciously offered to help her through her pregnancy, watch her kids during the birth, and now they have a great relationship. But just kind of speaking to the importance of being that bridge in care, and giving moms the support that they need.
Yeah, and even at a local level too, and just thinking of what we can individually do at a local level. You know, Jamie, and Christina's story, she shared about that woman's observation about how we kind of disregard the elderly. Maybe that's really hard to take on the care for someone who's elderly. There is a burden, but what a privilege it is also to take on that burden for family members. But can you, Jamie, speak to how, for the elderly, how it is that assisted suicide and euthanasia begin to be a temptation? What are you observing, and how do we as a culture curb against that?
I'd love to talk about the temptation side of it. I do want to just set the stage a little bit, because I think assisted suicide and euthanasia get a little bit of a back seat sometimes when these types of subjects of dignity come up.
Yeah. Right.
Assisted suicide, so euthanasia is the process by which a physician kills a patient, ostensibly with the patient's consent. Physician-assisted suicide is the process by which a patient is helped by a doctor to kill themselves. Euthanasia is not currently legal in the United States. Physician-assisted suicide is. It's legal in 13 states, including right here in Washington, D.C. It claims nearly 3,000 lives each year. It's claimed over 15,000 total since the start. It is coming. It was on the legislative ballot in 20 others. So, I mean, I still get questions like, is assisted suicide legal in America? And it's, yes, it's been legal here since 1996 in Oregon. And it's spreading very quickly. I mean, just very candidly, Virginia and Maryland, it very well might be here by the end of the year. So it's here, and it's one thing to fight back against it and to point out why it's wrong, and I'd be happy to talk about that later. But in terms of like, where is this coming from? Like, yes, there's a top-down push. There's organizations like Compassionate Choices, which, if you're not familiar with them, they're kind of like the Planned Parenthood of assisted suicide. Right. They do push this, but if you look at the fact that there's 7 million Americans with dementia, there's about 2 million Americans living in some kind of disability-related home, over 1 million Americans living in nursing homes, and that's just in like the narrowly defined term of nursing homes. And you look at the technology that's sweeping through this country and depersonalizing our human interactions, I mean, how is this not a temptation for some people? When you're suffering with a terminal illness, when you don't have a support network, when you're starting to forget your name and the names of your loved ones, or when you're caring for a suffering parent who can't remember your name, doesn't recognize your face. I mean, it's exhausting. Like you said, it's hard to take care of people. It's hard to love people and walk with them in their hour of suffering. Of course, this is going to be a temptation. So the two ways to counter it are one, by pushing back against the laws and you know, making sure they don't get passed. But like you said, it doesn't stop there. You have to walk with these people. You have to touch them in their hour of suffering. And Mother Teresa, who was such an inspiration to us when we were founded, she always liked to talk about preaching the gospel on 5 fingers, the passage from Matthew. Whatsoever you did to the least of my brethren, you did it to me. And so I think that framing of looking at people as individuals thirsting and yearning for love and for human connection, not to be abandoned on the wings, you know, lonely, but to be walked and accompanied, as long as that's not happening, and I don't think anyone can say that is happening in the American healthcare system, the desire and the temptation is going to be there.
I like what you said, because I think that it also relates to abortion. I used to work for a pregnancy resource center. I was a client service manager for 4 years in Connecticut. And I remember one day, one of our volunteers felt so bad, and she comes to me and she said, you know, I'm working with this client, and her situation is really dire. It's just like devastating. And I had this thought, like, maybe she should get an abortion. Wow. And I said to her, you know, it's okay that you had that thought. Obviously, it's not okay if you were to advise her that. You can't do that. But of course you would have that thought, because that's the world that we live in. And that's what we think when we get scared. When someone presents a case to us that's very difficult, we're sitting there and we're thinking, it's very easy for a volunteer to think, oh geez, like, I really don't know. Like, maybe you should go ahead and do that. I said, but then you remember why that's not a good idea. You remember that the baby has human dignity and value and life regardless of the circumstances. You remember that circumstances can change in a moment. You remember that we're here to help the mother and give her support and give her resources. And then you tell her those things. But you don't have to shame yourself because you just had this thought pop up in your mind because you're afraid, because that's the same thing that every pregnant woman in a vulnerable situation is going through. And a lot of people who are elderly, or even if they're not elderly, because there's people who die all over the world who are choosing assisted suicide who are younger, and maybe they're blind, or maybe they have cancer, and they don't want to be in pain, because none of us want to be in pain. Both with, you know, choosing assisted suicide or choosing abortion, there is this root of wanting to alleviate pain. You don't want to suffer. Human beings do not like suffering. So we're trying to figure out a way to avoid suffering. We don't want to suffer ourselves. A mom doesn't want to suffer by feeling like she has to be connected to the father of her baby when the father's abusive and she doesn't want to stay in that relationship with him, and she feels like, I'm going to suffer. She doesn't want to suffer the death of her own passions, she feels, if she keeps this baby. And people don't want to see their loved ones suffer. But I also love Mother Teresa and look to her as an example, because people like her and many others, they embraced suffering. Not that anybody wants it, but they said, okay, we're going to walk through this because there's a beauty to be found in that suffering. Nobody wants it, but if we don't reject it and we say, God, how can you use me in this situation? Then God will show up and he will be present. And I always say, this life is not our home. This earth is not our home, excuse me. So ultimately, no matter how difficult things are, even if a woman, you know, we like to always tell the really good stories. And like I said, stories are great, but, you know, people, if a woman chooses life, that is the right thing to do. Right. It doesn't mean that automatically everything's going to be easy. Easy and right are not the same things. And there will be some level of suffering and pain, but she will walk through that, and there's going to be a reward for that. And the reward is this beautiful life and whatever, you know, comes in the next life because she made that decision.
And I actually think it's more pro-life to talk about the reality of the hardships that do come with motherhood and with parenthood and with caring for whether it's a baby who's completely dependent on you or an elderly relative or loved one who's completely dependent on you, because we do live in this filtered world where we try to put on the best face. And so if you start to encounter that burden, you might think, well, is something wrong with me that this is such a hardship? No, this is part of the human experience. And I love those comments that you made, Christina, because I'm also seeing these parallels in our conversation and these parallels between, you know, euthanasia and assisted suicide and abortion. And on one hand, it's, are we just having this crisis where we don't see that life is valuable?
Right.
You know, are we having this crisis where we don't see that life is such a gift, even, and maybe especially when there is this suffering? That's one theme I'm seeing. And then also this theme, and maybe this is especially pertinent in the US, I don't know, I'd be curious on feedback here, of we're such a hyper-independent, utilitarian country that if someone's not serving me and benefiting me and is a quote-unquote burden, well, there's no value there.
I mean, I think that, so the storytelling aspect is so important because, at least in the assisted suicide and euthanasia space, one of the big reasons this stuff gets passed is because of a lot of heartrending stories that get told. It doesn't mean there aren't the equivalent on the other side, both A, in terms of victims, and then B, in terms of the beautiful stories of resilience and people overcoming these kinds of things. But it is important to look at the data also. And when you look at why people are getting physician-assisted suicide, this is in our studies, this is straight out of the states that have legalized this in Canada. Canada, by the way, if this is a uniquely American thing, euthanasia, which is legal in Canada, both are legal, but it's really just euthanasia. 4th leading cause of death. 200,000 people have died worldwide from euthanasia and assisted suicide. So it isn't uniquely American, but the reasons they're getting it, if you look at their lists, pain is like down here. It's fear of being a burden, loss of autonomy, loss of the sense of dignity. A lot of it boils down to fear of being a burden, fear of disability, really. And that's why disability rights groups oppose this stuff relentlessly. But that's what's driving people towards this. It's not pain.
No, and I was just speaking with some Canadians yesterday on this very topic, and they pointed out how once it became legalized, well, then the cases skyrocketed. Once you change the law, it does change the culture, too, and the acceptance of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're almost in a pre-Roe moment when it comes to assisted suicide. It's only legal in 13 states. If this stuff starts moving, and by the way, it's not just laws getting passed. Guardrails get removed instant. The second these laws pass, these organizations that lobby for this stuff, they immediately, I mean, it's literally go to their annual reports and their strategy. They immediately start removing the safeguards. And so, yeah, I mean, I think once it passes, the momentum starts to build and it can go quickly.
Can you talk, I'd be curious on what's the incentive for groups, for example, like Compassionate Choice. What's the incentive for them to have it be legalized? And
I don't know what the motivation, I don't want to get into motivations necessarily. I mean, I think that there's a large group of people where I think the idea of dealing with suffering and the idea of being a burden goes at the very core of their identity. I don't want to get too psychological with it, but I do think that for those organizations, I mean, when you talk about incentives, I mean, there's a massive financial incentive, financial pressures if this stuff gets passed to begin to, get rid of people. I mean, it's much easier to kill someone than care for them. The financial, you cost about $155,000 in medical expenses in your final year of life, based on some estimates, versus a $3,000 assisted suicide bill. I mean, the math there is crazy. In Canada, it's happening now.
Yeah, both in the beginning and the end. It's the same thing. Connecticut pays for 70% of the abortions through Medicaid, and people think that that's so gracious. Oh, wow, look at us as a state, such a progressive state, and we're poor, low-income women, we're paying for their abortions. It's like, of course the state is paying for their abortions because they don't want to pay for Medicaid, they don't want to pay for health care, they don't want to pay for welfare, they don't want to. So in their mind, they're thinking, because who's on these programs is lower-income people, a lot of people of color, not that they're the only ones, but in their mind, I think that they have done the numbers and they realize that it's easier and cheaper to just kill the baby before it's born than, provide for them throughout their entire life. It's easier to kill a person when they're older than, provide health care for them or, aid when they're in when they're in their elder years. It's very evil.
And I think with abortion, your line of it's easier to kill them than care for them. When you see a mom and she walks into that abortion clinic and she has all these different things swirling around in her life and all these different things telling her no, that whether it's your job or your housing or your boyfriend, if she goes in and she gets that abortion, all that she's walking out with is a dead baby. And she's going back to every single problem that she had. And so that's why Planned Parenthood and these organizations, they're not actually helping these moms or caring for them. And that's why pregnancy resource centers are so important, because they're getting to kind of the root of what is going wrong in this mom's life.
That's such a good point.
Claire, I'd love to ask, we've talked about, laws of assisted suicide that are passing. Looking at a policy perspective, are there specific policies you would like to see that would better support mothers and families and build a more pro-family culture?
Yes. So I think that culture and policy go hand in hand. And one of the biggest things that America needs and moms need is paid family leave.
Yes.
That 1 in 4 moms go back to work within 2 weeks of giving birth. And I always give the analogy that puppies are not supposed to leave their mothers for the first 8 weeks. And we have human newborn babies being put into daycare or left at home with a relative and taken away from their mom during such a crucial time for bonding. So I think that paid family leave is one that is super, super important. But Catherine, you talked about this more individualistic culture that we have in America. There's so much that can be done to just make parenting and family life more friendly. One of them I thought of, I was actually in the Tampa airport the other day, and I saw that they had a lane that was designated just for families of children 12 and under. And I have 3 little boys, they're 2, 4, and 6. And when we go to the airport, if there is a long line, that is going to be a headache for not only me, but everybody else in that line.
Right.
So I think that if they're, like in Tampa Airport, if there's a way that you can kind of get to the front of the line, that's a benefit for everybody, makes traveling easier for mom and everybody else.
No, those are great ideas. Christina, I'd like to ask you this, but please, if you have some answers to this, I'd love to hear Claire and Jamie, your thoughts as well. This moment that we're in the pro-life movement, what are you observing? You've been involved in the pro-life movement for decades.
Yes.
What are you observing now that you're heartened by, and what are you observing that you see as a real challenge?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is the abortion pill, because now close to 70% of abortions are happening because of the pill, and it's essentially become like marijuana. Before Connecticut, for example, my state, legalized marijuana, I don't know of any person who had a problem getting it. I mean, even when I was in college, I never saw a person that wanted to have, to get it, not getting it. Although I never took drugs my entire life, so I'm just putting that out there. Or got drunk in my entire life. And so it is possible for you college students. You don't need to go that way, but that's a little side note. But anyway, the abortion pill is extremely accessible. And then during the pandemic, the FDA loosened regulations and they said, okay, we're going to let the abortion pill go out through mail because it's the pandemic and people can't go and get it. And now that's over and they're still allowing the abortion pill to go out through mail. So people are having these abortions in their homes and it's very dangerous. Live Action, we just did a report where one of our staffers called a bunch of Planned Parenthoods across the country and was posing as someone seeking to take the pill. Do I need to get an ultrasound? I'm not exactly sure how far along I am. Oh, no, that's okay. You don't need the ultrasound, and it doesn't exactly matter. Yeah, sure, you can go ahead and get the pill. And that's so dangerous because what if they're farther along than they're supposed to be? Because technically it's 10 weeks, but what if they're past that? And so the abortion pill is a huge issue, and we all have to just recognize, just like you were saying, how kind of this Google is like the new sidewalk, so to speak. And of course, yes, still go to the sidewalks, but also recognize that now a lot of these decisions are being made online. In the same way, the abortion pill is a part of that. This is, yes, of course, still go to the sidewalk, but people are ordering it to their home. And so how do we deal with that? And so that's one thing that disheartens me. But then one thing that encourages me is the youth, is you guys. Like you mentioned, I started in my 20s. I found out my story when I was in college. I think I was a freshman or sophomore. Now I'm going to be 45. I have a family. My husband's here. My son's here in the audience. And it's been a long road. I remember when I was in my 20s and I was living in DC for a season, and I was praying in front of the Supreme Court with red tape on my mouth that said life. I was part of a group called Bound for Life. And I believed that I was going to see Roe versus Wade overturned in my lifetime. And it really didn't matter what anyone said to me, because I believed that God had told me that I would see that, and that we would see 3 Supreme Court justices, 3 strikes you're out, that would help us overturn Roe. And we prayed into that, and then one day that happened, and we saw that reality. So when I see young people who are marching for life, when I see them in their students groups, whether it's Students for Life or something else, when I see them speaking up and not being afraid, that gives me a lot of hope, because you have to take it where we can't. We can only go so far, and then you take the torch, and then you carry it. And some people are not going to want to talk to a 45-year-old, although I do think I look younger than that. But still, some people are going to want to talk to a 25-year-old or a 22-year-old. So I can't reach all the same people that you can reach. And so I'm always heartened by young people, and the way that, last thing, that people are telling their stories through social media. Like, I love TikTok. I know it's controversial in China and everything, but I love TikTok, and I love the TikTok trends, because that trend that just happened where people are saying, it's important that you, whatever, and then they're showing their past, and there's this pivotal moment where someone tells them, it's important that you don't listen to the doctor. Yeah. Do you realize how many pro-life stories are being told by that trend? Yeah. There are so many women saying it's important that even though the doctor told me to abort my baby with Down syndrome, I did not. And I'm seeing these people that would not go to a pro-life event or go online and say, hey, I'm pro-life. They are telling pro-life stories through TikTok trends. And so that encourages me.
That is. Well, as we think about, carrying that torch forward, Jamie, can you just reflect for a moment about how standing up for life, standing up for the vulnerable, means defending life from conception until natural death? And is that something you'd like to see pro-lifers be more vocal on when it comes to assisted suicide and euthanasia?
Yeah, like I said, I think that we're at a moment where people really need to lean in. This is an issue that is, I think we're at a critical juncture where some good pressure right now could have a huge impact down the line. With, and I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
No, just kind of reflecting on standing up for life from conception until natural death.
That's right. So with a lot of people that I think have focused on life's beginnings and things of that, for us as an organization, that's not an area that we focus on necessarily, but I think there's an assumption that there's just going to be carryover. It's like, oh, well, obviously, there's going to be a lot of people standing up for stuff at the end of life, and this is just going to happen. On the pro side of our issue, I think we're one of the biggest tents in any political movement on the planet. It is a purple movement. There's people from disability rights organizations, a lot of people from the left, a lot of people on the right. But I do think that the assumption that there's just going to be this natural coalescence around this, and that, if you're on this side with abortion, then you'll naturally be on this side with assisted suicide. I don't think that's necessarily true.
Right.
Because I think this idea of autonomy and this idea, I'll poke holes in it all day long, but who are you to tell me what I should do with my body at the end of my life? I think that's compelling for a lot of people on the quote unquote right. Especially with kind of that libertarian strain of thinking that's pushed that. So I think the assumption that this is just going to it's going to happen, it's not going to happen. And I think now's a really good time to lean in, not just at the lawmaking level and things of that, but in the caring of people, day to day. There's tens of thousands of people living in the DC area in nursing homes and ALFs that everyone right here, volunteering doesn't stop once you've been accepted into college, right? You can keep it up. And I'm sure everyone here is. But I think now's a good time to lean in.
And just a thought on that too, I've heard it said, the debate that's going on right now with euthanasia and assisted suicide is actually almost more challenging than the pro-life debate, because we can define this is the moment life begins. It starts to get ethically confusing with bioethics, this is when life ends, when it comes to,
yeah.
Do you know what I?
Absolutely. I think if you're talking about the former, it's a question of, is this one or two lives? And then with the end, it's like, this is my life. And I think that assumption on its own is something that's misleading, because you're not the only person involved in this decision. What we're asking for isn't the right to end your life at life's end. You're asking for the entirety of the United States healthcare system to turn on a dime and start allowing doctors and and nurses becoming angels of death as opposed to angels of care. So it is more than just yourself, but I think it's this idea of like, why go on? And so it is this question of meaning. We're spending $1 billion, I mean, hyper conservatively, it's likely far more once you factor in a lot of other variables. We're spending like $1 billion a year as a country in suicide prevention. And then in the meantime, we have these laws that say, well, here and here and here, if you fit those criteria, it's okay if you commit suicide. And once you make that move, you normalize this conversation of like, well, if you look like this, if you fit this profile, you're fair game. And then what that turns into, it changes the right to die. Right. It becomes a duty to die, and it's going to be a duty for the poor, the vulnerable, the disabled. And so that's why it's so important that we push back against this.
And thank you for pushing back. It is. It absolutely is. As we prepare to wind down the panel portion and turn it over to the Q&A, I just want to ask our panel one final question, and I think it's just, what's a challenge you might like to give our audience here today about how they can continue the pro-life mission beyond birth in our world today? Claire, can I start with you and go down the panel?
Well, one challenge, and this is something I actually kind of discovered this week to all of you, is to make sure that you know about and your friends know about the chemical abortion pill reversal. I think that is something that, as we've all talked about today, the pill is becoming more and more prevalent, that it is possible, if you've taken the first pill, to get a high dose of progesterone, and you can potentially reverse that abortion. So it's something, and actually I met a woman yesterday, and it was a heart-wrenching story. She was Houston-based, that her husband had actually poisoned her with the chemical abortion pill. But thanks be to God, she had seen an ad about the reversal pill. She took it and now has a 3-year-old daughter today. So we are just seeing in our Human Coalition clinics, we are getting more and more calls of women who have been coerced into taking the abortion pill, and it wasn't a choice that they wanted to make. So I think it's so important that people know that you can go to chemicalabortionpillreversal.com and get connected with a doctor who can help you.
That's a great reminder. Thank you for that. Jamie, what's a challenge you have for our audience on continuing the mission?
Yeah, if you're older and younger relative terms, so self-select here, however you identify. If you're younger, have the talk with your parents or whoever you see in that kind of parental role. And if you have children, talk with your children about what the end of life might look like. What do you want? The bulk of what we do at Aging with Dignity is advanced care planning, which is essentially thinking through how do you want to be treated at the end of at the end of life, not just medically, but spiritually, emotionally, personally. Talk about it. No one wants to talk about death. Find a funny video or something to bring it up. But what it does is the incredible conversations that come out of that, the self-knowledge, and then the knowledge of your loved ones is critical. Because what happens, a lot of these tragic situations that we'll see in our society are when people haven't thought in advance about this stuff. Crisis hits and everyone's scrambling, and all of a sudden you don't know what mom and dad asked for, or what they would want, or how things would go. So a lot of this confusion and a lot of the real horror stories that have driven this kind of legislation, I think they come from that lack of preparedness. So find the right moment, be bold, throw a bit of a Hail Mary, but I really think it's worth it, and it's something that I think more people should be getting around to do.
Absolutely. Sure. Christina.
So yesterday I was leaving the March for Life, and I saw this young black man, and he had a sign that said something like, abortion rights. And then there was another young black man, and they were talking back and forth, and there was an African-American woman, black woman, I use those interchangeably, next to them. And so I thought, you know what? There's only so many of us at things like this, so I got to know what they're talking about. So I pulled over, and I hear the young black guy, and he's like, I just think that women should have the rights for abortion. And then the other young black man who's pro-life, I would learn this quickly, he goes, yes, but their rights don't supersede the rights of the unborn child. And I had stopped because I didn't know if he had it handled, and I was going to jump in. And then when he said that, I said, you got it. I said, you got it handled. And I walked away, and just, I was so proud of him. And I thought, now that was encouraging to see, a black pro-choice young man and a black pro-life young man, and they're going back and forth, and this young man, he's like, he can relate to him, but he's got the, the moral high ground and the true argument and the truth. And so my challenge would be, pro-life apologetics, like learn the arguments. What are the people on your campus talking about? It's going to differ, Of course, the very basic things of what if a woman's raped, and what if, the life of the mother, and what if a child has a disease or something, bodily autonomy and such, but get really familiar. There's never been so much information at your fingertips. You don't even really have to search for it. All you have to do is go on YouTube. And there are so many organizations, Live Action. We have a ton of videos out there from former abortion doctors where they're explaining the procedures. There's people like Josh Bram and other people who do pro-life apologetics, where I think Stephanie Gray, where you can just watch their videos for hours and become the expert on your campus. Let pro-life be written on your forehead. You be that pro-life guy or that pro-life girl. And if people identify you that way, that's okay. Talk about it all of the time. Be obnoxious, but not really obnoxious. But, be kind and be compassionate and be caring. But just do not be silent, because you don't know who's watching you. It may be that at the end of the semester, some girl comes up to you and says, I was thinking of having an abortion, but you were always talking in class, or I saw your posts on Instagram, and so I decided that I wasn't going to do that. Or it might be that 5 years from now, you're on a stage and you're doing a debate at a university, or maybe you're a doctor, or maybe you're a nurse, or who knows. But I would just encourage you to give all of yourself to this movement. When I was in my 20s, I said, this is the greatest civil rights issue. This is the greatest human rights issue. And I came from a pro-choice family where I didn't know a single pro-lifer. I knew nothing about the pro-life movement. I couldn't have named you one person in the pro-life movement. But when I found out that I was almost aborted, I said, this is the most important cause of my day. So I threw myself completely into it, and I never looked back. I never stopped. And so I would ask the same of you. I would challenge you to do the same. Choose this movement, choose to give your all to it, and ask God to use your gifts and skills and talents for his glory and to save lives.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, amazing. I could speak to our panelists at great length, but we are going to allow you, our audience, to ask some questions. We have a microphone set up here, so if you do have a question for one of our panelists, we have some time for that now. Please feel free to make your way to the microphone. And do we have a first question here? Okay. We'll give you just a moment.
Thank you very much. We have to get back to Michigan. You guys are awesome.
Travel safely.
Safe travels. Thank you. Stay connected. Black pro-life woman on Instagram.
That's actually my group.
All right.
So
Is the microphone on? We'd love to. Okay, awesome.
So I am pro-life, but the big question I have is, how do I approach pro-life matters with women who are risking death or serious complications by having their pregnancy? How would I explain to them that they're holding a life? How would I support them through holding that life? And then how could I ask them to take that risk and possibly give up their life for someone they've never met? How do you approach that?
Well, I would say, first of all, that, I'm just going to be really blunt. You're probably not going to actually meet that many people with that exact circumstance. I think that the media talks about those cases as if that is like the norm for people who are considering having an abortion. And the reality, the numbers are, the majority of people are having abortions because they can't afford it, because they already have 2 kids, or their boyfriend's pressuring them, or their parents kicking them out. So I think, in my 20 years, I did a debate at Dartmouth, earlier this year, and the woman that was debating me, pro-choice black feminist, that was her story, and even that story wasn't completely accurate. It was really more that she was having a miscarriage than she was dying from an abortion. But even in all of my years of activism and working with people, it's actually very rare to meet people who are in those circumstances. But that being said, let's say that you do, okay? I think that one of the best things that you can do is connect them to pro-life OBGYNs and pro-life doctors. So there's an organization called APLOG, the Association of Pro-Life OBGYNs and Doctors. And I know a few of my own. Dr. Poppy is one of them, for example, that I have on speed dial if I needed for them to talk to someone. Because if someone is potentially facing death and their doctor is telling them that, even if you're the best advocate in the world, if you're not a medical professional, they might still distrust what you have to say. So if it was me and I'm talking to someone, they know that I'm an activist and that's where I'm coming from. And so they could believe me, but I would really rather connect them with a pro-life doctor or an OBGYN who could tell them abortion's never medically necessary. I can say the same thing to them, but if I could connect them with a doctor who could tell them that, perhaps there'd be a little bit more trust, because that's really what you're dealing with, it's trust. So a doctor who they trust is telling them you're going to die. And they trust that doctor, even though doctors are wrong all of the time. I mean, I've actually met more people who didn't listen to a doctor and then their baby ended up being completely healthy than I've met people who, are in that situation. But nevertheless, there's still that trust. And so it's really difficult for someone to just say, no, I disregard what my medical professional has to say. I would say, can you get a second opinion? Can I help you find someone that you can talk to that can examine you? Can I take you to see a pro-life doctor? Can I help you to get a second opinion and then go from there? And then it's a lot of listening. There's so much fear in a moment like that it's not a thing that you're going to win someone over with an argument or a debate. You're not going to be able to send them enough online articles if their doctor's telling them that they're going to die if they keep this baby. You can't send them enough online articles or enough, cool facts or good points to convince them otherwise. They really need to see a medical professional that can help them, that's pro-life, and that can explain things to them and then kind of walk them through that process. So that would be mine.
I was going to jump in and just say, I think when the question comes up of the life of the mother, there's two very important things to stress. One, every single state that has pro-life protections for preborn children has carve-outs and exemptions to protect the health and life of the mother. So there is no state that does not have that. And two, that when women are dying, and the left is trying to say they're dying from abortion bans, that is not what they're dying from, these big cases that you've heard in the media. What they're dying from is medical negligence, of doctors not treating the mom as they should be.
Yeah. And there is, having done some work with the American Association of Pro-Life OBGYNs, there is a lot of medical confusion at the hospital and legal level because the way it's coded, and this is getting kind of in the weeds a little bit, but it feeds into a lot of media misinformation that's out there. The way that a lot of miscarriages are coded is as spontaneous abortion. So there's a lot of women who've had tragic miscarriages who think they've had an abortion, and that kind of feeds that narrative as well. So thank you for that question. That is filled with such empathy for these women. And I think diving into that medical aspect of this very issue is going to serve you well. Thank you.
Thanks so much for the panel. My question is for Jamie. How can we work with the medical community to better manage pain at the end of life and support palliative care? I think that's the correct answer that we give as pro-lifers. But in reality, I had a really bad medical episode last year, and I was in hospital both in Mexico and in the US, and one common thread was the mismanagement of pain. I was like, this is international. It's happening in both places. So how can we best advocate for this to be learned? I know it is learned. My father is an anesthesiologist, but how can we also support the medical community, the nurses, and even the patients to be able to manage better pain? And then, of course, palliative care.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it gets to the heart of, I think, what drives a lot of people towards this. So from a technical perspective, not so much from a management perspective, we'll get to it in a second, but from a technical perspective, there is a vanishingly small set of scenarios where pain cannot adequately be managed. We've been able to manage pain, given the medicines that we have here in the West for decades now. I mean, there's almost no such case where that can't happen. Now, it does happen. So the question then is, how can we empower physicians to, I think number one, every doctor that I talk to, they're just like, I want to focus on patients again. I want to get out of the bureaucratic mess. I want to stop with this pressure of just like forcing, just like getting patients in the door so that we can bill and bill and bill. I mean, I think some of this is a systemic issue, which there is no easy solution for. There are a lot of great groups out there One that comes to mind is the Hippocratic Society. I know they're trying to work a lot on the education of physicians to bring it back to a patient-centered model of care. And so I think in that, I think as the patient being able, to voice what your preferences for treatment are, having someone where if you're in a position, you're under anesthesia or God forbid you're in a coma or something like that, you have, it's called a healthcare power of attorney, so someone who's legally able to make those decisions for you and be, not just like, be able to check the box like, yes, no, but like fight for you and be able to say like, she's not getting the pain management that she deserves. I know your hospital can provide this. Let's work on that. So I think those are two that jump off the page to me. As far as palliative care and hospice care go, hospice and palliative care, for those that aren't aware, that's more kind of comfort care. It's not, hospice in particular is you're not actively, fighting death. You're managing the pain that comes with it as you're accepting a natural death. A lot of that I think is just awareness and finding ways to incentivize. Again, we're not as involved on the legislative side, but I do think there are some things that we can do to make it easier for healthcare organizations to, number one, let patients know that they have that option and they have that right, and then two, make it more available and make it more accessible. But you're right. I mean, until that stuff gets fixed, there's going to be a push, I think, for people to choose the, the quote-unquote easy way out.
Yeah. Thank you for that question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, keep talking.
Can hear you.
Can you hear me?
There we go. Yes, you
can
can.
hear me. So first off, thank you for everything. So I kind of wrote down the question. So Roe versus Wade was overturned a couple of years ago. Praise God. I'm sure we're all very happy for that, right? But an observation that I've seen since the overturning of Roe versus Wade, at least a particular challenge in the pro-life movement as a whole, is that there's this misconception that abortion is now gone in the United States as a result, right? And I kind of see that. I'm from Texas, right? And Texas, praise God, is a very pro-life state. But for some reason, at least with pro-life work out there in Texas, there's still that misconception, abortion is gone. Why are we on the sidewalk? Why are we doing these different things, right? So, and that's a challenge of its own. So how can we help people recognize that abortion is still a prevalent issue and that it is still taking place in our communities, especially in those places where maybe we are gradually growing complacent, right? It's already a challenge of getting people to go out and participate, and on top of that, trying to convince them that this is still a prevalent issue.
Well, I was going to say, we've talked a lot about the importance of stories, but I think this is almost an instance of the importance of data. And just being able to share with them, there's endless news articles that are showing that abortion is increasing. And it's increasing drastically because of, like we've discussed, the chemical abortion pill. But I think that is something that's kind of on us as pro-lifers and people involved in this movement, is just to have those one-on-one conversations and let them know this issue is not gone and it's just as important as ever.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say the same thing. A lot of people don't realize that abortions increased actually after Roe was overturned, which is very tragic. And for people in Texas, it's important for them to know that people are crossing state lines. And so they may not understand that the abortion industry is helping people cross state lines. They're giving them money, either the pills coming in, secretly from states like mine that have like these, basically they're kind of like shield laws. So they protect abortionists, like my state of Connecticut protects abortionists from other states with our state laws. And it's really evil and wicked, and a lot of people don't even know that these pro-abortion states are doing things like that. So, and a lot of people don't know that that pro-abortion advocates are helping people to go to Mexico or to go to other places where they can get abortions and to cross state lines. And so I think that, if they were to go to pregnancy resource centers and kind of talk to the people on the ground, or even people in front of the, the clinics, they would probably hear some of these stories, because that's how I've heard some of these stories. But if they don't do that, then you're just telling them, no, like people are getting the pill in their home, or they're crossing state lines and they're getting abortions. Or in states like Connecticut or New York, abortions have just continued going on. And not only that, but our lawmakers have found ways to increase them. So yesterday, for example, on the March for Life, my Governor Ned Lamont, was doing a ribbon cutting for the expansion of a Planned Parenthood that our state taxpayer dollars gave $6 million towards expanding. And he was super happy about it. So while we're marching, he's on Facebook cutting the ribbon. He's like, we gave $6 million. We're expanding this Planned Parenthood. And it was just a couple months ago that they gave probably $2 million to quote unquote stockpile abortion pills. Yeah. So it's hard to get outside of like your own state and your own like, environment and community and what you see. But just helping them to recognize that, yeah, in conservative southern states and other places, it looks very different. But in, northern states or more liberal progressive states, like business is booming.
I actually think, and we have a greater challenge ahead of us now, that it's this state-by-state battle and actually changing hearts and minds and showing up for women. So the sense of urgency needs to be even higher, it seems. And I believe, I'm just going to do a quick time check. We might be out of time, I believe, or we can do, okay, we have time for one more question. Thank you so much, sir. All right, and this will be our final question.
Wow, what an honor. Well, first of all, thank you guys so much for being here today. Of course, we're on a college campus, and as a freshman, I think it's true for not just myself, but also for my friends. This is the first time we're experiencing the closest thing to independence, but I completely agree with what you've all said about this rampant hyper-individualism in our culture, and how even from years ago in our youth, we're taught that we need to do everything alone. So I guess my question is, if there's one thing that you could change about the way that we speak about autonomy and dependence to our children, what would it be?
That's a great question. That's a great way to end this
I'll just go with the Bible, that, we are our brother's keeper. And let's not lose sight of that reality that we're needed, that we're interconnected. People say different things. Some people say that, it takes a village to raise a child. I think that in society, we put a lot of emphasis on certain relationships, like romantic relationships. I've been married to my husband for, I think, 12 years now? We've been married. And people talk about, the one, like you have to find the one. We put a lot of emphasis on that. And then if you don't have that, people feel lonely. I'm single, I'm lonely. But, the reality is that all relationships are valuable, all interpersonal relationships, and we need people in different ways. Like, I value and love my husband, and I'm grateful and need that relationship. I also, when I got married, I had 10 bridesmaids because I love my girls. I'm a girl's girl, and I talk to my girls every single day. I love my mother, and she lives down the street from me, and we have a very good relationship. And I understand that people have mother wounds and father wounds, and it's hard to make friends, and they live in big cities, and they don't know how to connect. But just continually reminding people that we need each other, you are your brother's keeper, and pushing people away from their screens and outside the door. Although I'm an introvert, so I don't actually like to go outside the door all the time, but I'm a talkative introvert. But thankfully, I've already developed all my best friends in the past 20 years, so I can just talk to them on the phone. But that's what I would say, just kind of encouraging people to recognize that every relationship has value. Even, I love the stories where some young person will find their elderly neighbor or something, and then they'll become friends, and the elderly neighbor, and then, they'll help them do TikTok dances together online or something, and it's just really these kind of sweet relationships. It's also why I love Moana as a Disney story, because it's not about necessarily her finding love, but she loves her grandmother, and just valuing all those different types of relationships.
One recommendation I would make, I don't know if you've read it, but my friend Leah Sargent has a book out recently called The Dignity of Dependence, where she gets into kind of this very issue. And her book is so great because it just talks about how, you mentioned this individualistic culture we're in, that human beings are inherently dependent on one another, but that we are in an era of prosperity that's never been seen before. So you think about something as simple as you're sick and you have a cold. 50, 100 years ago, you would have to let your neighbor know, and they'd have to come over and make you some chicken soup. But now you can hop on your phone and Uber Eats yourself some chicken soup. And so it's just, we are so blessed to be in this era of prosperity, but it also has had drawbacks that we don't have the sense of community and connectedness that we once did. So yeah, definitely I would recommend her book.
I would just say Mother Teresa said it best. Each of us is meant to love and be loved. And I think that two-way street of understanding that we have to give out and we have, I mean, if you look at the word compassion, which is a word that's bandied about a lot in these debates by both sides, it literally, I mean, if you look at its roots, it's to suffer with. So all of us have the desire and the need to love.
Wow.
But then, like, yeah, that was a great book by Leah. It's like, we also have the need to be loved. Right, and so it's a two-way street, and understanding that dignity is not just in your ability to do; it's the ability to receive care and to receive love.
Beautiful.
It's important.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Great questions.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you to our panelists as well.
Thank you so much to all our panelists and our incredible moderator for sharing your perspectives and insights today here with us. And thank you again to Catherine for moderating really such a special discussion. Let's give them all one more round of applause. Before I handed the microphone off to Leah, I just want to say what an honor it has been to co-direct this conference with Leah. We've both been volunteering since our freshman year. Then we served 3 years on the board, and now it's just so incredible to be here as a senior. I'm excited to come back as an alum next year, so thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So first, I want to thank you all for attending the 27th Annual Cardinal O'Connor Conference on Life. Those of you who are left, thank you for braving the weather. I know it is, we can't really see through the windows, but I'm sure it is starting to come down out there, which is exciting. However, the day's events are not over quite yet. Please join us at 5 p.m. for the Mass for Life here in Dahlgren Chapel. It is truly a beautiful honor to have this Mass here in Dahlgren Chapel, and it is just the most incredible homage to the dignity of human life. We have a bunch of Jesuits here on campus who are going to come down and can celebrate with us, which is just incredible. And it will be celebrated by Father Sean Haggerty, who's on sabbatical here at Georgetown, which is super exciting. At this point, we'd also like to acknowledge the Sisters for Life who spoke during the breakout sessions and who are with us in attendance today. Founded by John Cardinal O'Connor in 1991, the Sisters are consecrated to protect the sacredness of human life. Their missions include caring for vulnerable pregnant women and their unborn children, inviting those wounded by abortion into the healing mercy of Jesus, and fostering a culture of life through evangelization. We are honored that they are here to join us each year at our conference, which strives to live up to Cardinal O'Connor's motto that there can be no love without justice. It is now my distinct pleasure to welcome Sister Avelina Joseph to the stage to close our conference in prayer. At the finish of the prayer, our time in this hall is concluded.
In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Come, Holy Spirit. Father, thank you for the gift of life. Thank you for the gift of truth and of love, for the gift of this conference today, and for all who organized it and all who participated in it. Jesus, we ask you for the gift of courage and integrity to live according to the truth that we believe in. We ask for your forgiveness for all the ways we have not reverenced our own lives or the lives of others. Lord, may you bring healing to our hearts, our families, our nation, and all the ways we have been wounded by the culture of death and the culture of lies. May you restore our sense of identity and meaning as made in the image and likeness of God. And good Father, I ask you to give everyone present here and everyone who attended a sense of your love, that they might know you value them for who they are and not for what they can do or achieve. Give us the grace to hope and to work for a culture of life. We ask this all in the name of Jesus, through the intercession of Our Lady. And we give all glory to you, Lord, as we pray. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.